There's Boy's Own Picture of You, BBC Three Counties Radio. I'm Nick Coffer. Time to talk horror. CLOPHILL is a tiny, almost quintessential English village hiding in the Bedfordshire countryside. In the 1960s, the village and the nearby ruins of the 14th century St Mary's Church achieved notoriety following reports of a sinister black mass ritual which saw tombs desecrated, remains removed, and animals sacrificed. Hope you're not eating your lunch right now. CLOPHILL has now become infamous for continued reports of alleged supernatural activity ever since, and today sees the DVD release of the Paranormal Diaries CLOPHILL. Kevin Gates is the man behind the project. I asked him a little earlier today to explain the event which inspired him to create the film.
Yeah, there was an incident at CLOPHILL at Old St Mary's in March 1963 which made the national headlines, which what happened was essentially a group of so-called devil worshippers went up there, dug up some graves and took the bones into the old church, arranged them and performed some kind of ritual that a lot of people thought was a black mass. It subsequently made the headlines across the world and was a big story for a while. It was sort of a revivalist time for the occult in the 60s, and that led to a number of other incidents across the country, and also at CLOPHILL over the coming years. It became sort of a bit of a hot spot for that type of activity up until sort of the late 1970s.
We never did find out who was responsible, did we?
That's right, we didn't. No, it's a mystery, and I think that's why there is this sort of intrigue with CLOPHILL to this day, is that no one ever found out who did it. They left sort of no trace, really, and the police sort of, reached a dead end, and it's just continued to be a mystery to this day.
You grew up very close by. Did you ever go to the church late at night?
I did, yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of a rite of passage in Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire. I mean, pretty much every teenager's been up there at some point. And I do remember going up there, I think it was around about 1990, in a friend's beat-up old car. This was pre-internet, so there was no sort of knowledge about really what happened up at CLOPHILL. It was just, there was this idea of it was a church that faced the wrong way and, had a history of witchcraft and all this sort of stuff. So we went up there. It was a cold night, raining. We saw the ruins in front of us and scared ourselves senseless, and then drove off back home.
And here you are 20 years later creating a film. Now, when I watched this film, I was expecting blood, I was expecting gore, I was expecting fake wounds. I'd been told it was a horror movie. Instead, I got a documentary, or perhaps you'd call it a mockumentary, where I struggled to work out the difference between fact and fiction. I'm guessing that was what the effect you were trying to create.
It was, yeah. I mean, with the film, it was a bit of an experimental approach. We'd done a few films before, Michael Bartlett and I, who is the co-director, and we did a film called The Zombie Diaries that was a found footage film. That's sort of a sub-genre that's become quite popular recently.
Well, what does this found footage mean? Because I've read this term all over the internet when researching your film, and I've never heard of the term before.
Found footage is sort of as if the tapes or footage that's being presented is found and is real, and that's what we sort of did with The Zombie Diaries. Obviously, it is a film that's about zombies, so you can't really go too far. But with CLOPHILL, it was a bit different. It's more of a mockumentary. It is presented as a documentary, and the important thing is that 90% of the film is actually real. There's only sort of a small amount of the film that we actually staged and wrote sort of fictional scenes. Most of what you see is completely real.
However, that 10%, although you make it sound like not a lot, it is a key part of the film. Did the cast, did the crew know that you were adding in these fictional elements when you went and filmed it? They
didn't know. What we did was we set off to do an investigation over a weekend. This was back in June 2010. It was a while back now. And they had no idea. We had interviews set up with witnesses, experts. We were going to spend some time up at the ruins. But up until the very last scene that we were shooting, they didn't know that we'd planned a few surprises for them.
I'm just imagining you a bit like the Wizard of Oz behind a curtain, just controlling these 4 people in your cast and in your technical team. Is that a fair description?
I don't know if it's quite like that, but
you were certainly in control. That's what I'm trying to say.
Certainly in control, yeah. But there were things that happened that we couldn't have planned. We had a security team up there who were sort of helping lock the place down so that we could carry out our investigation, and they weren't there to be in the film. They were there to do security, but things started to happen that they couldn't explain, that were nothing to do with us at all. They were seeing figures, hearing footsteps, all this kind of stuff, and obviously we had to turn the cameras on them and say, what just happened?
Do you think there's an element of put yourself in any churchyard in any town or village in the country at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're going to get footsteps and weird noises and rustling and just that whole sense of being spooked?
I think that's right. I mean, Clophill particularly, because it's so isolated and it's got this history, but pretty much anywhere. If you go up there, you're going to hear rustlings in the bushes from wildlife. You're going to see things. So I think that's fair to say. Yeah.
What were you hoping to achieve by the film? Were you hoping to actually understand what may have happened in the past, or not?
Well, I've always been intrigued by the story, and getting some of the witnesses to stuff that happened in the 60s and 70s was interesting, because I wanted to know a bit about the mystery and find out more about it from people who actually were there. But obviously it was an experimental film as well. We didn't really know what we were going to get over this weekend. And I looked at the footage. It took a long time to cut together, and then I sort of pieced together additional scenes that would sort of fill in the blanks and turn it into a film that actually would have some sort of commercial appeal, as well as just being a documentary on the church.
So how does it work? You've done 48 hours worth of a shoot. How many hours of footage did that give you? There
was a lot. There was, we had lots of cameras running. We had hours and hours of footage, and what happened after that, which was quite interesting, is I did another film that happened straight away and took up my time for the next year. So I had to sort of come back to the Clophill film and try and edit it into something that made some kind of sense, because there was no sort of structure as to how the film could have been edited. It could have taken a number of different ways, and the idea of having interviews with us as the documentary team was something that happened in post-production.
That must be part of the fun of creating a film, though, that you almost don't know how the end product is going to turn out when you start.
That's right, and that is the fun. It's also sort of, it's also playing on your mind and how are people going to actually react to this film. And it took a long time before I even showed anybody the film, but when I did, the feedback was very favourable, so we made some more changes, and then we did well in terms of getting it out to the right people and getting distribution deals.
The end of the film is not neat and tidy. Why did you do that?
Well, I think it goes
without
back
giving away the ending, but do you know what I mean? There's not a sort of definite, this is what happened, here we are, end of film, goodbye.
It does go back to the legend of Clophill, in that it's kind of unsolved. There are things that, there is an end to it, but there are also other questions. And I wanted to do something along those lines. I didn't want to just have, this is definitely the ending, and there's nothing more to say. I wanted the audience to sort of leave the film perhaps pondering, thinking about it a bit more. And obviously it does leave room for a follow-up as well that we're working on at the moment.
What really intrigues me is I was researching the film, and you do a search online for the name of the film, and it brings up dozens, if not hundreds, of websites. ScareYouWitless.com, HeadUnderThePillow.com. I've just made those two up, by the way, but there are so many websites dedicated to horror movies. Now, I don't watch horror movies, and I'm beginning to believe there's a whole sort of subculture out there of people who love horror movies, who are passionate about them, who seek them out, who watch them. Have I got that right?
You have, yeah. I mean, horror films are huge, not just amongst sort of teenagers. It's, I got into horror movies when I was about 4 or 5 years old, believe it or not, by sneaking downstairs and watching a film that my parents had rented when I shouldn't have done. And, and I was sort of hooked from there. And you go to some of these horror festivals, like Clophill was shown at Fright Fest in London back in August. And, the audiences there are great. They're so sort of fanatical, so into this sort of stuff, but also really friendly as well. So it's a sort of great atmosphere. And there are a lot of websites out there. There's a lot of dedicated people who love these types of films.
After filming the film, editing the film, putting the film out for people to watch, and doing various other horror movies, did you actually believe in ghosts?
Well, I've never experienced anything myself. People I know and trust tell me things that happen to them. The closest I've ever had to a supernatural experience is sleep paralysis, which is a very scary thing that happens, where you wake up in the middle of the night and you're awake, but you cannot move, and there's always this presence that's coming towards you in the room, and everybody experiences the same thing. That's not a ghost, but that is something that I guess is sort of supernatural, or has sort of links to that. Whether I believe in ghosts, I need some evidence, really. I'm sort of still on the fence, I think.
The Clophill Diaries released today on DVD. Is it today or tomorrow?
It's
15th?
Out today, yeah.
There we go.
It's out on DVD, yeah.
Released today on DVD and in certain cinemas as well. Have I got that right?
Yeah, it's showing at Real Cinemas, which I think is more of a sort of an up-north type thing. So unfortunately, it's showing the cinemas around.
You say
here.
that, there's one in Boreham Wood.
Okay.
There is a Real Cinema in Boreham Wood. So at Real Cinemas and also on DVD. Where can we find out more info about the film?
Mainly on the Facebook page, facebook.com/Clophill.
It's been a surprisingly unscary experience talking to you, Kevin. Good luck with the movie and with your future projects as well.
Thanks a lot.